Good morning. Good job. And on behalf of Auburn University President Stephen Leith and the Auburn Board of Trustees, I'd like to welcome everyone to this year's National Security Forum. I'm Ron Burgess, and I will serve as the moderator for this event. A couple of administrative points as we begin today's forum. I would like to remind everyone up front, please, if you have a cell phone, please quiet it and make sure it's on vibrate. I would also remind everyone that everyone should have received an index card when you arrived. If you have a question, please write it on the card and pass it to the end of the row. Our students will collect those cards throughout the forum. Please remember to write your question as concisely and, for some of the faculty in the room, as legibly as possible. The director has agreed to answer as many questions as our time allows, but I will end the forum promptly at 10 o'clock. I will remind you at the end, but when our event concludes, we ask that everyone remain seated until the podium party has departed. Why are we here? The current world situation we find ourselves facing today is a complex security environment marked by a broad spectrum of dissimilar threats. These include rising regional powers and highly adaptive and resilient transnational terrorist networks. The United States finds itself facing a rise in foreign military capabilities, threats from cyber actors, aggressive non-state actors, and hostile intelligence services. These challenges should be viewed in the broader context of a highly connected and interdependent strategic environment. The challenges are characterized by the emergence of new political, military, and economic centers and affected by mass communication, mass migration, and urbanization. Our speaker today is uniquely qualified to address this environment. Gina, as she is known, was officially sworn in as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency on May 18, 2018. She is responsible for the agency's intelligence collection, analysis, covert action, counterintelligence, and liaison relationships with foreign services. She is a career intelligence officer, having joined the CIA in 1985. She has several tours as a chief of station and held numerous senior leadership positions, including deputy director of the CIA, and has served at every level within the National Clandestine Service. She has been recognized with the Intelligence Medal of Merit, a Presidential Rank Award, the Donovan Award, and the George H.W. Bush Award for Excellence in Counterterrorism. In other words, she has done it all in the intelligence field, and she has done it very well. Now, that's her bio that everyone can read. I made it a point to reach out to some mutual friends. Some she is aware of, some she's not aware of. And I always find it interesting of what's behind the bio, which I think speaks to the person. She is described by friends and peers of ours in the intelligence community as a quiet professional. She cares deeply about her people. She's thoughtful. She's resolute. And I can't tell you how much in her position in Washington, D.C., that last word really means in terms of the position that she holds. She's committed to an integration for the intelligence community, but understands the requirement for the basics. In other words, she really is a true intelligence professional and represents the intelligence community with distinction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Gina Haspel.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'd like to begin by thanking General Burgess for the warm welcome. I also want to thank all of you for being here today. It's really encouraging to see so many young people taking an interest in our nation's security and in the role CIA plays in protecting our country. I also want to congratulate Auburn for winning the SEC tournament and making it to the Final Four for the first time. And as a Kentuckian and a diehard Wildcats fan, the Auburn-Kentucky game was a little painful to watch, but I have to admit it was a well-deserved victory for the Tigers. And once my team was out, I threw my support to your guys. And speaking of historic sports rivalries, I thought I'd share a little story with you from early in my career. I was overseas on my first assignment in Africa when I met a Baptist missionary couple. Let's call them Jerry and Rosie. Jerry was a proud Auburn alum, and since my boss Mark happened to be one as well, I'd often overhear stories about Jerry and his love for Auburn sports. One day I learned that Rosie, Jerry's wife, had had quite the scare the night before. Rosie had found Jerry in bed, clutching his chest and gasping for air, and she thought he might be having a heart attack, a terrifying prospect when you're hundreds of miles away from the nearest hospital. Rosie ran over to Jerry and asked if he was okay, but Jerry didn't answer, and so she became agitated, pleading for him to say something. At last, Jerry bolted up in bed and shouted, "Touchdown Auburn! Touchdown Auburn!" Rosie was taken aback and asked him what was going on. Jerry ripped off his headphones excitedly and explained that he had been listening to an Auburn football game on Armed Forces radio. The Tigers had just scored a touchdown on a reverse, beating none other than Alabama. "Dine can wait," Jerry shouted. "We just beat Alabama." Now that just goes to show that you can find an Auburn football fan anywhere, even in the most remote corners of the globe. But in all seriousness, it's in places like this where you'll find CIA officers as well. Our men and women put their lives on the line every day, often in the world's most dangerous locations. They do it to uncover the secrets our nation needs to defend itself and to advance American interest across the globe. Secrets we can't get any other way. Now, I'm sure you'll understand this morning that I can't offer any recent espionage tales from the streets of Moscow or Tehran. Those are classified. But I can say something about CIA's unique mission and the spirit of sacrifice embodied by our officers day in and day out. It's hard to believe that I'll be celebrating my one-year anniversary as director of CIA next month. And I can tell you that it's been everything I've expected and so much more. I may be a 34-year veteran of the agency, but it still seems like yesterday when I stepped across the iconic seal in our headquarters lobby for the first time. I still remember the thrill of being sworn in as an officer, raising my hand and reciting the oath to protect our country and our Constitution.
Do you remember the thrill of the CIA black site that you tortured people in? And the evidence that you destroyed? Tell these young children. Tell them who you tortured. You know their names. They're still in Guantanamo Bay. You're a decrepit human being, and the only people you should be talking to is a prison guard in a jail cell.
I'll continue. When I first came to CIA as a young recruit in the Directorate of Operations at the tail end of the Cold War, I was eager to learn the nuanced art of espionage, evading surveillance, putting down dead drops, recruiting agents, or bumping unsuspecting individuals on foreign sidewalks. Now, a lot has changed since I first arrived at CIA, but our mission remains as relevant and important as ever. And this is what makes our officers excited to come to work each morning, including me. But the business of espionage is risky work. And as former Director George Tenet used to say, CIA doesn't do easy. The hard jobs come to us. Our officers, whether at our headquarters or in the foreign field, carry out those jobs with courage, ingenuity, and daring do, and I could not be more proud of them. Over the past year, our leadership team has taken steps to improve CIA's ability to tackle the many challenges we face, and our efforts are beginning to pay off. For starters, we've devoted more time, money, and creativity to our effort against some of our nation's toughest adversaries. Our Russia and Iran investment has been strengthened after years of falling behind our justifiably heavy emphasis on counterterrorism in the wake of 9/11. Groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda remain squarely in our sights, but we're honing our focus and resources on nation-state rivals. Additionally, we're applying cutting-edge technologies and tradecraft to allow us to react more quickly to global developments, like targeting a terrorist organization wherever it arises and before it spreads. We're making great strides with our foreign partners. Those ties are stronger than ever. And let me tell you, our intelligence allies around the world can really open doors and get things done on behalf of our country. I frequently meet with my foreign counterparts, either in Washington or over there, and they're generally very interesting characters for whom I have great regard and even fondness. There's one counterpart who's especially fun, very James Bond-like. He worked his way up through his service, has great spy stories, and is most definitely someone you want on your side. And when you have partnerships this close and personal, you have colleagues who go out of their way to share with CIA their really good stuff, their best intelligence. And our country is tangibly benefiting from these relationships. We're also sending more of our people to the field, not only case officers, but analysts, technical experts, and others. It all comes down to this: if you have a bigger footprint overseas, you can get more done where it really counts. Along with that bigger foreign presence, we're placing a renewed emphasis on foreign language expertise and training. We want our men and women to be closely attuned to the cultures in which they operate and to speak the local language. And that aligns well with our push to strengthen diversity and inclusion at CIA. Our mission demands that we draw deeply from our nation's rich and diverse talent pool. We just had our best recruiting year in a decade, and we'll do whatever it takes to make the agency an employer of choice for all Americans. Finally, no foreign challenge has had a more direct and devastating impact on American families and communities than the flow of opioids and other drugs into our country. A scourge that has killed more Americans than any terrorist group ever has. And that's why we're taking concrete steps to increase our contribution to the President's whole-of-government approach in tackling this epidemic. I recently had the opportunity to meet with some of our officers who are on the front lines of this effort, and I'm proud of the work they're doing to stop the problem closer to the source. CIA is stronger than I've ever seen it, and I wish I could say more about what our officers do worldwide, day in and day out, on behalf of all Americans. But for their protection, and frankly for yours, I won't. What I can tell you is that our officers take on jobs that test their mental and physical strength to the fullest. I just returned from a visit to a war zone where I met with CIA men and women who on a one-year deployment work 7 days a week, often going days without sleep. These officers were so hardworking and so motivated by the mission in this dangerous location. I could not have been more impressed with them. Their missions are long and arduous, and the operational tempo can be grueling. Our nation is asking them to do more every day, and they sacrifice a great deal to keep our country safe. At the same time, they are not just intelligence officers. They also are devoted fathers and mothers, loving spouses and partners. Their families sometimes endure long stretches without knowing where their loved ones are, the dangers they might face, or the risk they must take. And at times, our achievements come at a terrible cost. In the past few months alone, some very brave officers have been seriously wounded battling terrorists in a remote corner of South Asia. Since 9/11, 42 agency men and women have died in the line of duty. Before I close, I'd like to share the story of one of those heroes, someone with a very special connection to Auburn. Nearly 20 years ago now, we had an officer who was on assignment in Afghanistan. He had deployed there in the fall of 2001 as part of our government's immediate response to the terrorist attacks of September 11th. His name was Johnny Michael Spann, and he was an Auburn Tiger, class of 1992. Mike was born and raised in Winfield, Alabama. A natural athlete, he played wide receiver and running back for the Winfield High Pirates. As a child, he dreamed of becoming a soldier. His bedroom walls were covered with Marine recruitment posters. He joined the Marines as a student at Auburn, where he graduated with a degree in criminal justice. And during his military service, he rose to the rank of captain. Mike came to us at CIA as a paramilitary officer after 8 years of military service. In his application to CIA, he used the words action, responsibility, and leadership to describe himself. And he embodied these traits when he deployed to the arid plateaus of Afghanistan in the fall of 2001. On November 25th of that year, Mike was in an ancient Afghan fortress where Taliban prisoners were being held and questioned. These captives had supposedly capitulated, but their pledge of surrender was a ruse. Mike was interviewing a group of them when hundreds of prisoners suddenly revolted. Immediately before he was attacked and killed in the uprising, Mike was able to warn an agency colleague of the imminent danger, allowing that officer to get to safety. After hearing of Mike's death, former director of CIA George Tenet said the following: "He led one of our teams into Afghanistan. There, he tracked the authors and allies of terror. There, while fighting for the future of the American people, he fought to bring a better future to the Afghan people. And it was there one evening that he said he would gladly risk his life if he could help make the world a safer place for his wife and children." Mike was the first American to die in the line of duty in Afghanistan. He demonstrated the highest standards of duty and sacrifice at the forefront of our fight against terrorism. In his short time in Afghanistan, Mike's actions played a pivotal role in our battle against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in the region. His story is a poignant reminder of the unwavering commitment of all our men and women serving on the front lines. For me, as for our entire agency family, the 129 stars on CIA's memorial wall are more than just symbols. They are solemn reminders of friends and colleagues who answered their nation's call and who willingly risked their lives to protect us all. It's a privilege to join you in honoring one of our greatest heroes, Auburn's own Johnny Michael Spann. And I hope his story gives you a sense of just how critical our officers are to the strength and security of our country. Mike's CIA colleagues carry on his work and his legacy in the most dangerous parts of the globe, and photographs of Mike hang in CIA stations around the world. As I look back on my first year as director, I am more in awe of the men and women at CIA than ever before. And I know that Auburn graduates also know a thing or two about serving our country, having made invaluable contributions over the years by signing up for the tough jobs as warfighters, astronauts, and of course, as intelligence officers. We at CIA could not be more grateful for your school's distinguished history of service to our nation. And as you carry on that great tradition, I hope to see many of you again as partners in the honorable and essential work of keeping America safe and free. Thank you all very much. A little close.
There you go. So we're going to start the question and answer period, but Gina, with your indulgence, before we start, so I have participated in numerous events like this. I consider myself an intelligence professional, like yourself. I've had incidents like we just observed. I say at this stage of my life, I'm not surprised by anything else anymore. But what he referred to, and I don't think she needs to respond, we're a nation of law, of civil liberties, and your intelligence professionals do a hard job every day. A couple of books have referred to me as the father of Guantanamo Bay, since he mentioned it specifically, because I was the intelligence professional that stood up the interrogation at Guantanamo when the first detainees showed up on 11 January of 2002, out of the sandbox, as we call it. We did the best we could with the guidance that we were given, with the resources that we were given, to protect the United States of America. And I firmly believe that the people that were involved in that and continuing in that business do the best they can every day to follow the law, to follow the guidance that they've been given in support of the security of this nation. While I defend, and I will defend, his right to make the statement that he made, because we are a free country, there's a time and a place for that discussion. And that was not the time or the place, in my professional and personal opinion. If you want to ask a question, wait your time with everyone and you can ask your question. Thank you.
I'm just saying, if she won't ever answer it, then when can we expect you to?
And you can be excused. Thank you. Gina, welcome to Auburn University.
I'm privileged to be here. Thank you, Ron. I am.
Touche. I love it. So, Gina, what do you consider to be the most significant challenge facing the United States intelligence community today, and specifically for your Central Intelligence Agency?
I think, of course, there are many challenges in terms of what's happening around the world, whether it's terrorist groups or nation-state rivalries, the drug epidemic that we talked about, cyber threats. So we face a wide array of different threats, but I think maybe one of the most unique challenges we face at this point in history is the rate of technological change. And we're endeavoring at CIA, and I think in the other U.S. intelligence agencies, to stay abreast of those changes and to maintain our cutting edge. And so it's one of the reasons I like to visit universities where we have important partnerships and can learn about some of the technologies that universities are making progress against.
Fair. You know, so as we say in Washington, D.C., there's the cycle. And the cycle, for those that don't follow, from January to May is when leaders in the intelligence community, whether it be yourself, the Director of National Intelligence, others. We call it the worldwide threat testimony piece. And so as I've reviewed that over the past couple of years, different leaders will talk about that the greatest threat to the United States are some nation state actors, whether it be, China, Russia, that sort of thing. Talk about cyber, they talk about non-state actors, they talk about terrorist threats. What, in your opinion, is the greatest threat facing our country today?
Well, I think all of those different intel agency heads are quite right, and they're usually speaking from the particular domain that they cover. So the head of NSA will talk about cyber threats, and CIA may talk about nation-state rivalries. All of those things are true. And as intelligence professionals, you and I know that we're always asked to define it in terms of the threat facing the United States. But as I thought about coming here today, one of the things I wanted to make clear, of course we do face those threats, but I don't believe those threats are existential for the United States. They're serious and we have to work against them. But our intelligence agencies, our military personnel, our law enforcement colleagues are all working very professionally and, as you noted, 24/7 to deal with these threats. And I have such fundamental confidence in the American system and in the American people that I sometimes worry about the emphasis on the word threat.
Fair. So today you find yourself out, and I really do applaud you being out and willing to engage, because of all our intelligence agencies, honestly, it's hardest for CIA. And I understand that. But you're out here in public, you're out talking as the director. What would you say to the American people that talks more about the work of your people and what they do each and every day, and the other professionals in the intelligence community that helps them understand us?
I think CIA is a bit unique in that so many of our officers, their affiliation with CIA isn't in and of itself a secret. And that was certainly an adjustment for me after being an undercover officer for more than 30 years to come out into the public spotlight. But I am very proud to represent the men and women at CIA. CIA is in the business of collecting secrets. And so it's very sacred to us that we protect the foreign nationals who provide those secrets to help our country's security. And we have to protect our own people who take risk in collecting those secrets. So we try and be, and we do understand the need for transparency, we try and be as open as we can, but to protect the secrets that we must protect.
So, Gina, one of the things I did not say in your introduction, because I think it goes without saying, but for the folks that don't know, you are the first female director of the Central Intelligence Agency. And I know the strides that we have made in the intelligence community in terms of promoting the best and the brightest. But what would you say to young women out there about leadership in your agency and what it is women ought to be aspiring to?
Well, I think at this point in history, it is a great time to be a woman at the agency or indeed in the wider intelligence community. At the moment at CIA, setting aside my own position, the head of operations is a woman, the head of analysis is a woman, the head of science and technology is a woman. You might sense a conspiracy here, but our general counsel is a woman. The head of diversity and inclusion is a woman. And I think really the significance of me being in this position as a woman is only significant in that it sends a signal to the young women entering duty at CIA or the other intelligence agencies that their prospects are strong and are rich, and that they have role models and they can aspire to rise to the most senior leadership positions at the agency or in the other intelligence agencies.
Yeah. So, Gina, where you sit, having sat in those types of positions, you know, the reporting that comes in all the time that you see, how do you handle, how do you cope? Because very rarely do you read good news coming across your desk in terms of what it is that you're out there gathering. So is there a way that you go about handling all of that on a daily basis?
It is rarely good news, now that you mention it. But I think for those of us in the intelligence business, we thrive on that. We love the excitement of tracking events around the world. We're interested in foreign cultures. We've lived in those countries. And so it's really exciting and interesting to us. For anyone who's considering a career at CIA or in any of the other intelligence agencies, I think I can guarantee you'll never be bored.
Fair. I like this question only because I think it will help you kind of explain to some folks that may not understand the purpose on the CIA side. But the question has to do with looking at homegrown terrorism in terms of the threat. So domestic terrorism, the question points to domestic right-wing, I don't want to characterize, but we have homegrown terrorism. What is CIA's role in domestic terrorism?
CIA's focus is more on the foreign terrorist groups. Of course, the FBI has the primary responsibility for domestic terrorism, but we're not engaged in collection activities like that in the United States. But I think all of the intelligence agencies, and there are 17 agencies in the U.S. intelligence community, are obviously very dedicated to sharing information to make sure that nothing is overlooked. But we do, CIA does play a role in tracking lone wolf style attacks or attacks that may be inspired by foreign terrorist ideology such as ISIS that may inspire someone in the United States to carry out an attack.
Yeah. So, Gina, you entered the CIA in 1985. That's a little after my time of going into the intelligence community, but if you go from 1985...
Thank you for saying that.
Well, so I'm a dinosaur. But coming forward from that time, as you look at our profession, what strikes you as you now sit as the director on how our profession has changed over that time?
I think the thing that strikes me the most is how it hasn't changed. I think the professionals who come through the door, and I frequently swear in new classes on Monday mornings in our lobby in front of our memorial wall. And I look out at these, very young and bright faces and people with really impressive, impeccable credentials. But it very much reminds me of when we entered on duty, and people who are excited to be there, who came because of the mission, who want to be part of something greater than themselves, and they just look so eager to roll up their sleeves and get to work. And so they seem to be much smarter in terms of technology mastery and social media than you and me. But other than that, I think they're very much like we were coming through the door. Yes,
Gina and I joked a little bit beforehand. Neither one of us have a Facebook page. We don't Twitter, we don't LinkedIn. That's just not something we do.
But in the, just to talk a moment about transparency, of course, CIA does have a Twitter account. There are some people still around at the agency who really don't know what that is. And are against it in principle, I'm sure. But our Office of Public Affairs is getting ready to launch our Instagram account. So.
Oh, it's a brave new world out there. So when you think back, you were talking about your days at University of Kentucky, and then you went to Louisville. So did you ever think you would enter this intelligence profession? Is that what you were thinking about at the time?
I can't say I was thinking about it when I was an undergraduate in Kentucky, because in those days, CIA didn't recruit on college campuses. It was a different time than it is today, where we're on many college campuses recruiting. But it was a little bit later when I had a job working with Special Forces, U.S. Army Special Forces, where I first heard about the agency. So it was a couple years after college, and I was immediately intrigued when I heard the word CIA. And I read a couple books that I got from the library about the CIA, and then incredibly, this could never happen today, and this will date me, but I wrote a letter to the CIA on my manual college typewriter. And I mailed it to CIA with my resume, and I didn't have an address, so I just put CIA, Washington, D.C. And here I am. So good on the Postal Service, you know.
That's a good story. So one of the questions we always seem to get as intelligence professionals, and so I'll ask you now, because I have my own joke to this, as I told you last night. So what keeps you up at night, helps you not go to sleep?
Well, interesting, it's not all those threats, because as I said, I always have confidence that America will prevail against the threats. But I do have, on any given night, I have a number of officers in harm's way. So I do sort of dread and sleep lightly listening for the phone call that's going to be bad news about someone being very seriously wounded or worse. And when I come in each morning, when I log onto my computer, the first note in my email queue is an overnight summary from some dangerous places around the globe. And I look at that very quickly to make sure that no one has been harmed.
So you're here on a college campus, and I think, as I remember from reading a little bit about you, your undergraduate work was foreign languages and journalism.
Yes.
So I found that on the internet, but I'm an intelligent professional. I do not collect on friendlies, but I did read that about her. But what would you tell college students out there? Are there disciplines that we're looking for more than others that would help contribute to a career in the United States intelligence community?
I think the great thing about considering a job in the intelligence community is that we have every discipline in the world. We have foreign language instructors, we have case officers, we have analysts, we have engineers, we have cyber experts, we have data scientists, we have finance officers, logistics officers. So really, I think the intelligence community and the agency, as a microcosm of that, can offer a very rich and rewarding career across a wide range of disciplines. I don't think we have librarians, we have everything, doctors.
Even lawyers.
Even lawyers, lots of lawyers.
Lots of lawyers. Yes, we do. So 9/11 occurred, and it was a cathartic event for this country. But it brought about some change in this country, especially in our profession. How do you see that United States intelligence community since the passage of the Intelligence Reform Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004?
Well, there have been some very important changes. And of course, our structure leading up to 9/11 was really one meant to deal with the challenges of the Cold War. And that meant information was not widely shared. It was compartmented, bigoted, we say, and protected. And there were very thick lines between, for example, FBI and CIA, domestic and overseas. And I think some of the lessons that were incorporated in that legislation is we had to break down some of those Cold War stovepipes, and we had to look at the terrorist threat more holistically, and we had to be able to work across agency lines, across domestic and international. And of course, it's a global world. The threats are global. And so the biggest change that came about was the move to share more aggressively across agency lines. And that has held us all in good stead, and people still work at that, but people take it very seriously. And I think the intelligence community in the United States is more integrated, more cohesive, and more focused on common goals than it ever has been.
Fair. So you're coming up on a year. As you look back, you were in the agency for a long time, but is there anything that has surprised you that you say, I really hadn't thought about that with all the other positions, but now that I'm in the number one position, that has kind of hit you and resonated with you?
Well, as you say, as a 34-year veteran of the agency, I know the agency very well. I know our mission, and I know our workforce, and they know me. So it's been an easy transition from that standpoint. The change from being undercover to coming out into the open was a bit of an adjustment. But other than that, I don't think there have been that many surprises. What has been a blessing and a joy, and I'm very fortunate in that my deputy is also a 30-plus year veteran of the analytics side of CIA. And that allowed us to come in and roll up our sleeves and get to work on day one. And what we're concentrating on at the agency today is, a couple of years ago under my predecessor, we got away from the Cold War structure that we had had since 1947, and we went to a matrixed organization. And I think that's more appropriate for the complex world that we live in and the complex issues we work. And so what we're working on, and my deputy, Vaughn Bishop, has really done a lot of good work on this, is trying to integrate across the agency and to collaborate in a way across disciplines to make us as powerful as we can be to go up against some of these tough challenges that we talked about, Ron.
So continuing that, so again, as you look back, then is there still something out there that you just haven't been able to get to with your workforce that you want to get to, but because of the day-to-day everything going on and it never stops, is there still something that you visionary that you want to get to that you haven't been able to get to quite yet?
I think the most important thing we're working on is increasing our investment into what we call the hard targets, but for example, Russia and Iran. Because of what happened on 9/11, a lot of our resources, our money, and our people were dedicated to the terrorism fight. And we have made great strides in that struggle. And we don't take our eye off that ball, but we are increasing our resources against threats that come from malign actors like Iran and Russia. And we still have a lot of work to do on that front, but we're making good progress. On a kind of lighter note, I would say that one of the things that many folks at the CIA workforce asked me to do something about was our cafeteria service. But I got that done last month, so it's all downhill from here. We swapped, we have a new food service provider.
too much information. It was the same problem at DIA, but y'all were the Cadillac compared to the Volkswagen that I had at DIA.
You know, we serve overseas all over the world, so we have pretty high standards in terms of food service.
Yeah, I can look at Mark and see that. Yeah. Hey, it's fair to say we discussed you being the first female director. And you talked about some of the changes and where things are now with the CIA. But as we look across our community, while we have made great strides, there are some that would say it's still a male, dominated. But is there specific advice you would give to young women about how to, move in that field to, move themselves along in the intelligence community?
Well, certainly I should make it clear that as I came up through the ranks, I had wonderful sponsors, we call it, and mentors along the way, one of whom is sitting here today with us, an Auburn alum. But I think my advice to young women at CIA would be exactly the same that I would give young men coming through the door. And that is work hard. And the other piece of advice I like to give young officers is raise your hand for the tough jobs. Don't stand on the sidelines.
How would you say, we were joking, we were talking about Instagram, Twitter, and all that. How has social media changed the nature of our business for intelligence professionals?
Well, it's really, in some ways, been revolutionary because, of course, terrorists and Russian intelligence, for example, are big users of social media, either to plot terrorist attacks or to influence events around the world. So we have to be engaged in terms of the foreign environment, not the domestic, but we have to be monitoring those medium to look for threats and to make sure that we understand how terrorist groups, for example, are using social media to propagate their ideology. And that's something that everybody in all the intelligence communities around the world are struggling with, that, how to work against that messaging. It's a very powerful messaging medium.
So this morning, we've mentioned so Russia, China, you've mentioned Iran. What would you say about North Korea?
Well, of course, as you know, General Burgess, North Korea has been a problem that many administrations have struggled with. And at CIA, it's our job to monitor regimes that have secret weapons programs or who are engaged in proliferation. But I am very proud that we've been able to support this administration's effort to engage the North Koreans in a dialogue. And that's not to downplay the difficulty of that or the obstacles and challenges associated with it. But after years of failure, I do think that President Trump has shown a lot of wisdom in reaching out his hand to the North Korean leader and to suggest to them that there might be a different future for the North Korean people. And at CIA, we have incredible expertise on North Korea, and we're working very hard to support the President, the National Security Team, and Secretary Pompeo as they try and establish a regular and positive dialogue with the North Koreans to try and help them get to a different place and build a different future for the North Korean people.
Fair. Gina, can you help people understand? So we have a large intelligence apparatus in the United States. I think the unclassified number, when I left, the unclassified number that we used was somewhere, would say around 100,000, not counting the people in military uniform, but as I call it, the three-piece suit workforce there, doing their job each and every day. But the intelligence community doesn't decide what it's going to focus on and what it's going to go out and do. We contribute to that, but our work is guided by others. Could you help us understand that process a little bit and how we go about doing our work?
There is a formal process that sets the requirements that the intelligence communities work against. And of course, you played a big role in building that machinery. And when it's true that the intelligence professionals play a very big role in informing that process. But I think over the years we've become pretty sophisticated in how our government sets up those requirements and makes sure that that investment, large investment, 100,000 people and a big budget, that it's responsive to the needs of the policymakers.
Fair. When I was reading to the group your bio, it talked about foreign relationships. As I say, intelligence is a team sport, and could you help kind of illuminate that a little bit in terms of the importance of our partners and how all that comes together?
I'm really glad you asked that question because I think it's a bit of a secret, the degree to which the American intelligence agencies, and I'll talk about CIA, which I know best, works closely with and depends on our allies. And it is the part of my job that, next to engaging with our workforce, that maybe I enjoy the most. There are some incredible professionals around the world working to defeat terrorism and to push back against malign actors like Iran. And we are engaged heavily because, as you say, no one can do it alone. So we really rely on our foreign partners to help us with geographic access, to share with us their best intelligence. And I'm really proud of the relationships we've built. I think it would be familiar to most of you if I pointed out that our British colleagues are our closest partner. I have had the great fortune to work with our British colleagues over many years, and it is a deep partnership, and we tackle problems together. We trust each other, and an incredible amount is shared between our two countries. But there are many other partners that wouldn't necessarily be at the natural top of the list, but people all over the globe who are working to do the right thing and with whom we have forged a very productive relationship that works to the benefit of the national security of the United States.
As we look to the future in the intelligence community, are there skill sets that you see on the horizon that colleges and universities can help provide in the numbers that we need as we look toward those technologies?
I think we keep a short list of those, and we are recruiting aggressively for data scientists, people who have expertise in AI. I would encourage, and I think there are just pockets of excellence across the country. We don't emphasize foreign language in this country enough, but we need people with advanced foreign language proficiency. So those are some of the skills that we're looking for.
Yeah, I kept trying to get the Army to accept Southern Alabamian as a foreign language, and I never could get that to resonate very well. So, Gina, as you think about that future, I think you said a little earlier, you alluded to, as we watch the world, some things change, but for the most part, there's a lot of consistency as we watch some things. But over your time, and as you look forward a little bit, do you see things that are not evolutionary in change, but are revolutionary, that have really kind of surprised you?
Well, I think for intelligence services around the world, maybe the biggest challenge is the digital environment in which we operate, and things like ubiquitous technology prevent challenges for secret services that are trying to stay below the radar. So there are there are some technological changes that have taken place that mean that intelligence services all over the world, in order to retain their competitive edge, have to adapt or they won't survive.
One of the things I say as an intelligence professional, and so not to put you on the spot, just to get a sense, I make a joke sometimes when I speak to people that I'm never going to write a book. I don't get out there and talk on news shows, and not everybody needs to do what they. But as you look toward our profession, we have secrets, and how do you look at this opportunity to engage in terms of how transparent do we need to be with the American people, and to have a conversation? Because again, we are a nation of laws. We are a nation that we focus on protecting civil liberties, but discussions like this are important.
I think you're right, it is important, and I think, in the Cold War it was viewed quite differently. But I do think, and it's something that we're constantly talking about at the agency, and I think more broadly, on the need for more transparency. And for example, we have a position at CIA that we didn't have a few years ago, a privacy and civil liberties officer. It's a wonderful officer who's in that position. But I think we have to protect the nation's secrets, and I think the American people expect us to do that. And there are real consequences that I think sometimes aren't realized to unauthorized disclosures, where actually people's lives are affected, and sometimes sources' lives are affected. So I'm talking about sources and methods. But at the same time, I think the American people need to have trust and confidence in their intelligence services, to know that their intelligence services follow the law, and that they are heavily regulated, and we have very active and productive and responsible congressional oversight of the intelligence agencies. And all those pieces are important, and that's why, frankly, I do come out and engage with audiences like this, and I particularly like to come to universities where we're talking to young people who may be thinking about where they would like to spend a career after they graduate.
So, Gina, as we come to the close of this forum, do you have any final comments, remarks, or things you would that we haven't covered that you would like to say?
Well, I think I would simply say, and I think the story of Johnny Michael Spann is a great illustration of what connects Alabama and Auburn University with an agency like CIA. And I would just encourage the students who are here today you're at a very exciting point in your life. You're on the cusp of what could be a great adventure, and I urge you to think about what you're interested in and whether there's a place for you in the intelligence community or at CIA. I personally am just very privileged to be in this position and to be able to represent the men and women at CIA who do extraordinary things. It's a remarkable workforce, and I want the American people to know that 24/7 CIA is standing the sentry all over the globe.
Thank you, and I would concur with your comments on that. But again, on behalf of our president and our board of trustees, I would like to thank each and every one of you for being here today. For those students, and actually, if there's some of you older folks out there that are interested in a career in CIA, tonight at Langdon Hall, 6 o'clock, there will be an opportunity to engage with some of the director's folks, and you can have a conversation on the possibilities of that. So with that, we will conclude the forum, and again, I would remind everybody to please, if you would, hold in place until we depart the auditorium. Thank you very much.